Okay, picture this. You're standing on a heat-scorched plain in Mesopotamia. The air is shimmering. And in your hands, you're holding this small, cracked piece of baked clay, barely the size of your palm. It's rough, it's ancient, and the last person to touch it lived 5,000 years ago. This little object, it holds one of humanity's quietest but most powerful inventions, writing. But this isn't just some old receipt for barley or livestock. The language scratched into this clay is Sumerian. And what's wild about Sumerian is that it's a linguistic isolate, a language with no known relatives. It's totally unique in human history. So this isn't just a forgotten tongue, it's a record of an entirely different way of thinking. For centuries, we've been trying to crack the code of what's locked inside these tablets.
And that leads us to the huge question we're digging into today. What if one of the very first things humanity decided to write down was a system for sorting people? To get to the bottom of this, we're using a totally modern tool to decode this ancient mystery: artificial intelligence. An AI that can scan thousands of these tablets at once and see patterns that have been invisible to us for millennia.
So, as the AI started piecing together all these digital fragments, it began to hear a voice rising from the dust. And what that voice was saying was, well, it was systematic and, honestly, deeply unsettling. The first pattern the AI spit out was just startling. The Sumerians weren't just writing down names. They were systematically classifying people. You had the Sagig, which means children of light, and they were always linked to priests and temple staff. Then you had the Namalu, the descendants of darkness, who show up in records about stone haulers and heavy construction workers. This wasn't random at all. It was a deliberate, organized system.
So you have to ask, right? Is this what we think it is? Is this the world's first caste system, a rigid hierarchy written into the very DNA of their society, tying your spiritual essence to your job for life? At first glance, it really, really looks that way. But as the AI kept crunching the data, a much more complicated and frankly more fascinating picture started to emerge. What first looked like a simple pyramid of power was actually something else entirely. It was what you might call a cosmic blueprint. And the difference is just profound. See, a hierarchy divides and ranks people, superior, inferior. But the Sumerian gods' blueprint saw different groups as reflections of different divine forces. The children of light weren't better than the descendants of darkness. They were just different parts of a cosmic whole. One represented the heavens, the other, the earth. Neither one was superior. They were just essential ingredients needed to create a balanced, complete universe. It's a circle, not a pyramid.
And get this exact phrase shows up again and again on the tablets. They are separate, but together they are complete. This wasn't a philosophy of division. It was a philosophy of cosmic harmony. Every group had its part to play, a specific divine energy to channel, and only when you brought them all together was the world truly whole.
There's another line the AI kept flagging. The god Enki mixed them. For a long time, scholars argued about what that meant. But the AI's analysis points to something incredible. It probably wasn't a curse or a sign of being impure. It was a celebration. For the Sumerians, humanity was meant to be divinely mixed. Our strength didn't come from purity. It came from the complexity of all these different divine elements blended together.
That cosmic blueprint, it wasn't the only game in town. In another Sumerian city-state, Lagash, a completely different idea of identity took root. This one wasn't based on the stars, but on the very soil beneath their feet.
In Lagash, they had this word emena. It kind of translates to our people or blood union. But this wasn't about genetics or family trees. It was a symbolic brotherhood, born from working the same dirt, sharing water from the same canals, eating bread from the same grain. To say, I am of the emena meant something like, I was made from the labor of this land right alongside my brothers. Your identity didn't come from I, it came from we.
But here's the tragic part. This collective identity, it didn't last. The tablets tell a pretty sad story. The rise of private property started to fracture the community. Suddenly, there was temple land, and then there was the people's land. A new class of priests and landowners started exploiting the poor. It got so bad that a ruler named Agina brought in the world's first known social justice laws to try and protect widows and the poor. But the tide had already turned. The AI noticed that over time, the word emena shows up less and less, and the word lugal, which means king or literally big man, starts appearing more and more. The we was fading and the I was taking over.
You know,
Whenever you create a powerful sense of we, it almost always creates a shadow, a them. And Sumerian of civilization, for all its genius, was built on the backs of a silent, invisible workforce.
They were called the Martu, a word for outsiders or Westerners. Think of them as the migrant laborers of the ancient world. They were absolutely essential. They hauled the stone, they dug the canals, they carried the grain. They were everywhere in the society, but at the same time, they were nowhere. The tablets lay out the stark reality of their lives. A Martu could repair the temple, the house of a god, but he was forbidden from building his own home. He could bring life-giving water to the city, but he could never own the land it touched. You see these administrative texts that meticulously count every single bag of grain he delivers, every hour of labor he performs, but they almost never, ever record his name. He wasn't a person. He was a function.
And then the AI found one line, just scrawled on a tiny fragment, that says it all. It reads, "Martu spoke, but his voice was not written down." An entire group of people, the very people propping up a civilization, were systematically written out of their own story. Their voices were being erased from history at the exact moment history was first being recorded.
So, in the end, that balanced divine blueprint and that collective emena, they were eventually replaced by something much more rigid, something we'd recognize. It was a new social structure that was mirrored perfectly by a physical one, the Ziggurat.
A temple text lays out this new hierarchy with chilling clarity. It asks, what does each level of society offer to the gods? The king offers gold. The priests offer incense. And the people? The people offer their silence. Power was now measured by how close you were to the heavens and how far you were from the earth. The higher you climbed that ziggurat, the further you left the common people, those black earth people, behind. And this is where that ancient echo gets really unsettling. We don't build ziggurats out of mud, brick, and stone anymore, but the structures they represented, the pyramids of power, the nameless workforces, the belief that being close to the top makes you somehow more pure, those structures have never really gone away. They've just changed their shape.
And that leaves us with one last big question. 5,000 years after humanity first put a reed to wet clay, 5,000 years after we first tried to define who we are, you have to wonder, have we ever truly managed to step out of the long shadow cast by those very first structures?